Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. MiHoYo has finally formally announced the Mualani rerun for 5.8, so that gives us an excuse to talk about my favorite character in the game. Um, so the topic is of this rerun video is that I think Mualani is criminally underrated by the community. So why why might people underrate her? Well, I think on release her kit was very janky. Um, if people didn't like jive with the like surfing and like marking the enemy gameplay. And then on top of that, it has issues, at least at release, such as targeting issues. These kind of got addressed in like the next patch. She doesn't really miss the bite anymore. It's only under very like super niche circumstances that the bite itself will miss. And people kind of figured out how to use the burst better. You kind of just use it point blank. You don't want to use it as a projectile. You want it to like instantly explode, which happens when you're on top of the enemy. Now, her like AoE missiles that you get from marking enemies, those are unfortunately still jank. So, they still just miss sometimes. They won't spawn. They'll hit the ceiling, right? Kind of still sucks, but hey, um, it's not really as big of a deal as people make it out to be. Like there's characters like Mohuika where the melt is actually like ping based and you have to reset anyway because you'll get a like reverse melt instead of a forward melt. So it's just one of those things. Her kit itself is just kind of one of those things that people kind of hold against her, just to kind of hate on the character, at least in my opinion. But for like the players like me who've stuck with Mualani, I feel like she's a freaking beast. She's always one of the fastest. Um, she also has some of the fastest abyss clears. With like higher investment. Just recently in the new like Stygian onslaught mode, she was one of the first characters to like complete the dire difficulty at C0R1, even, against the lava dragon, a matchup where on paper she's not even favorable for, right? Um, but anyway, I also think that she's like a super like friendly character to build, because she's using a set that gives her 40 crit rate. She has room for like a lot of other stats that she thankfully scales with, such as HP and Elemental Mastery. And Elemental Mastery is like doubly good now on this character because all of her damage is vaped. 100% of her damage is vaped. So she really values like EM subs a lot and HP subs as well, since she's an HP scaler. And there's a very many external sources of HP buffs, right? Her weapon situation is very good too. The Nadlin Craftable is very good for her. Widsith is very good for her because of her Sig is kind of clunky. It does not burst. It does not burst the buff. Or my bad. It does not buff the burst. Only her normal attacks. So if you don't mind resetting, Widsith is actually really good. Her teammates situation is, I think, unlike more recent characters, she doesn't actually lose that much damage, if any at all, from like not having her best in slot teammates. I think you can kind of argue now her best team is like Shillinan, Mohuika, citlali. You kind of just like you're able to like set up a melt for Mohuika. It's a little bit better if you have like C2 citlali or Mohuika, but I think even when the characters are all C0, it's like technically the best Mualani team. But um, she has a lot of options for other teammates, and you don't even lose that much damage, right? Like if you don't have Shillinan, you can just play another VV unit such as Kazuha or especially Sucrose. Sucrose is really good because Sucrose gives EM buffs. Um, you can play another Hydro character such as like Candice, and if you're using Shangling, you can even use Yelan or Farina with her. Uh, and like I said, I think the only character that Mualani really wants is probably Shillinan, just for the multi-wave red shred. But you can still even use Zhongli, just because of Mualani's like game plan is to one-shot the enemies. So then in multi-wave, just that extra or the multi-wave or res shred is really nice to have. Um, Now, if being a DPS isn't enough, Mualani can also double as a support now. Um, and going forward into the future, because she's a Nylon character, she gets to hold the scroll artifact set, um, which means you can always buff, your DPS's damage by 40%. You can always get that 40% damage boost, and because she's a catalyst character, she gets to hold TTDS. So I feel like, um, even though unfortunately they put her banner right before 5.8, I feel like she can still offer a lot of value going into the future. And she is, like I said, she's a very strong DPS when you invest in it, right? You get good artifacts, maybe you do some vertical investment, and we can kind of go over her. If you want to put in some vertical investment right before Not Cry, that C1, her C1 is really good. I think C2, even though personally I would say like C2 and C3 are kind of a package, just because of her playstyle, right? It's like you want to one-shot waves, you want to front load as much damage as possible. And although C2 doesn't help with that, like C2, while it gets your damage out faster, at least before, like, who really cares about having an extra shark? Because that like fourth shark is usually unbuffed. But now I think with Stygian Onslaught, where there's like higher HP thresholds, and you're fighting for like longer periods of time, those extra sharks add up over the course of a fight, right? Which could be another extra 1 million to 1.5 million damage. So I actually think her C2 is like a lot better now. But yeah, like you can stop at C1. That's really gonna be like her best con before C6 still. It'd be like C1, C3, C6. And the same update is also C2 citlali, so that's something you can think about as well. But yeah, and if we're talking about like looking towards the future, there was a leak, a sus leak, about a potential Pyro Escoffier, which if they are indeed some kind of like lunar vaporized support, that would be like a huge buff to Mualani. It would be a huge buff. Because, if you could run like Shangling or Mofuika plus this Pyro support, we'd also be able to like run that Mualani again, run that Farina, and they'd be vaping too as well. As long as there's enough Pyro application from the Shangling and then the potential Pyro support and or Mofuika, because if that character offers the red shred, the healing, they're able to consolidate like everything plus like some kind of like vaporized buff, whether that's just a higher multiplier, elemental mastery. That'd be really nice. That'd be really fucking good. She could potentially get better in the future. Like I said, she's a really strong DPS. She's literally obliterating Spiral Abyss chambers in 1-2 rotations. And even in the future, when she's potentially gets screwed over by the HP inflation, she could double as a support, right, with TTDS scroll. So that's the video for today. If you're thinking about Mualani, or you were like on the fence, hopefully this might have changed your mind. I think she's still a very strong character in the meta, but people just don't talk about her, right? Because of her potential gameplay issues, which I don't really think are real issues at all. The only issue, like I said, could be the missiles just being finicky. So thank you. Let me know what y'all think, and I'll be pulling C3. I'm at C1 right now. Hopefully we get lucky. I'll see ya.